Hi, welcome back to my channel. For those who don't know me, my name is Katharine, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my April TBR or to be read list. Before I get into this list, I just want to mention first and foremost that I am a slow reader. I read about 5 books per month, which averages about 1 to 1.5 books per week. So I do only have 5 books on this list. I do read just for a hobby. It's just fun for me. I have a full-time and part-time job, so I read when I can. Audiobooks have been a huge help recently, so I will be reading these books on audio for some of the part of reading these. I also won't be putting too much pressure on myself to complete all of these books on this list, just because of the fact that, like I mentioned before, I do just read for fun as a hobby. So I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself to feel like I need to get all of these done. I don't like to feel forced when it comes to hobbies or reading for that matter, just because of the fact that it's just fun for me and I want to keep it light and happy, because this is like an escape for me from like everyday life. Reading is a form of escapism and I want to keep it that way, so I don't want to feel too forced when I want to complete these books. So these are just a pile of possibilities is what another terminology or term that I like to use when talking about my TBR or to be read list. But let's just get into this. I do have 2 goals that I set for myself for 2025. One is to read 1 nonfiction per month and 1 classic per month. And then on a list that I made, I will tag the video down below. I set out 25 books that I want to read in 2025, and I will mention what those books are in this list when the books come up. So let's just get into this. So my classic that I want to get to this month is the 3rd book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I read The Hobbit in January, which is technically the prequel to the Lord of the Rings series. Then I read The Fellowship of the Ring, which is the 1st book in the Lord of the Rings series, in February. And then I read the 2nd book in the Lord of the Rings series called The Two Towers in March. And this will be the last book that I need to read for this trilogy or series. I guess the Lord of the Rings is a trilogy, but when you include The Hobbit, it's considered a series. I think the whole entire series, including The Hobbit, is called Middle-earth, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong, please correct me down in the comments. But this is like the last and final book that I have to complete like this whole trilogy or series, whatever you want to call it, if you want to include The Hobbit or not. But anyways, I am really happy to be completing this trilogy series in April, because this is the one book that I actually do want to finish. Like, I'm going to try to force myself to read this because I just want to be done with it. I'm realizing I'm not a huge like fantasy person, but I do want to complete the Lord of the Rings series or trilogy, whatever it is, because of the fact that I just want to say that I've read it to have read it, if that makes sense, because it is such a beloved and popular fantasy book series, book trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. J.R.R. Tolkien, I think, is considered like the father of fantasy, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy series, whatever it is considered like the foundation of a lot of fantasy novels and series. So I wanted to read this just to say that I've read it, but through reading this, I just have realized I'm not a fantasy reader. I like when books are like somewhat grounded in reality. Not that I don't have an imagination, but I just feel like a lot of the things, like the world building, I should say, that a lot of these authors include in their books and in their series, I just don't care about. It's not that I can't imagine these worlds that they build, but it's just something I honestly don't care about. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's just the reality of what I like in books and what I see what I enjoy in books and things like that. I just don't find fantasy books that interesting. Now, with that being said, like, I have found a lot of books with magical realism in them to be enjoyable. For example, I really liked The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, so I will be continuing reading like more of like magical realism type books, but I just don't know about fantasy. But I will try, well, not try, I will be finishing the Lord of the Rings series in April, and the last book is The Return of the King, and again, it's by J.R.R. Tolkien. So hopefully, not hopefully, I'm not going to say hopefully, I am going to finish this book and this series, trilogy, whatever you want to call it, in April, and I can't wait to be done with it. The next book is considered the classic for this month. I meant my nonfiction read rather than my classic read. I'm such an airhead sometimes. And that is Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper. I got gifted this a few birthdays ago and I haven't gotten to it yet. John Piper, I've heard, is a great author and just like a great theologian in general. And I can't wait to get to this. I'm probably going to listen to this on audio just because of the fact that like with nonfictions, I tend to get more of an experience out of it listening to the audiobook because it feels like someone's like talking to me and like either giving me advice or telling me about their life. Like, I just love listening to nonfictions on audio because it's a more pleasant experience. So I can't wait to get to this. It's a Christian living book, if I'm not mistaken. So make sure to keep an eye out for me reading this month, or yeah, in April. So this month. So, well, actually when I publish this, it's not yet April. I think it's going to be like the last day of March. But I'm going to be reading this in April. That's what I'm trying to say. And this is actually considered a classic too, but I'm not considering it like the classic towards like my reading one classic per month, if that makes sense. But that is the first book in the Anne of Green Gables series by L.M. Montgomery. It's just called The Anne of Green Gables, and there's multiple other books in this series that are called different names, but like this, or have different titles, I should say, but this title is specifically called The Anne of Green Gables. It's part of the Anne of Green Gables series, as you can tell. But I've been wanting to get to this book series because my grandmother is actually from Prince Edward Island, which is where the Anne of Green Gables series takes place. And I never read these books growing up, and I actually watched Anne with an E on Netflix a few years ago, and I really enjoyed it. So ever since then, I've been wanting to read this. Especially after watching the Netflix. I mean, I've always wanted to read it because of my grandmother, but like specifically after watching the Netflix Anne with an E. But I can't wait to get to this. I don't know why. A lot of people seem to relate this book to fall, but for me, like whenever I think of Anne of Green Gables, I think of spring. For some reason, that's just how my brain thinks of Anne of Green Gables. But I've heard that as you read through the books, it goes through different seasons. So, like, I don't think, like, you necessarily have to read Anne of Green Gables in, like, one particular season, whether it be the spring or fall or whatever season you choose to read it in. Because, like, as you go through the series, like, the seasons change just naturally throughout the books. So I just can't wait to get to this because this is a book that's on my 25 books of 2025. So let me see how this goes. I'm certain, more than certain, that I'll get to this book, hopefully. I have been wanting to get to it for years, so I just can't wait to read this. The next two books are kind of like my wild card books, or my like free-for-all books. These are books that I just like want to read because I'm in the mood for them. I'm also like very much like a seasonal reader, so these books kind of remind me of spring in some aspects. And the first book is The Letter Tree by Rachel Fordham. I read Where the Road Bends by her back in like November. I wasn't a big fan. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars, so it was not bad, but honestly didn't impress me. I had really high expectations for that book, but I wanted to read like one or two of her other books just to kind of see if like her books got better, because like I've heard so many good things about Rachel Fordham, and me being the person that I am, and I like historical fiction, and Rachel Fordham writes historical fiction. She's actually a Christian historical fiction author, so this is considered Christian historical fiction. And this reminds me of spring just because of like the tree on it, and with it being springtime, plants and, you know, the leaves on the trees are growing. So I wanted to read this in the springtime, and I can't wait to get to this. I heard it's like kind of a cross between like You've Got Mail and Romeo and Juliet, so I can't wait to get to this. It sounds like a really interesting book. And then the last book that I have on my April TBR is a Francine Rivers book. I am a huge fan of Francine Rivers. She's one of my favorite authors of all time. And this book is called The Scarlet Thread. I've been trying to read through her backlist because she has so many books on her backlist. And after reading Redeeming Love and The Masterpiece, I've been just steadily working through her backlist. I just finished the Mark of the Lion trilogy in March, and I am looking forward to getting to more of her books. I believe this is about, it says it's about two women centuries apart, and they're joined together through a tattered journal as they contend with God, husbands, even themselves, even until they fall into the arms of the one who loves them unconditionally. So apparently this is about two women who share a journal in two different time periods, I'm guessing, from that little tiny synopsis. And it's just about like their lives and how their lives connect through this journal. And it sounds really interesting. I am looking forward to reading this. I personally think of spring when, you know, looking at this cover in particular, just because it looks like she's outside, she's with her journal, and when it's spring outside, like especially here in New England and the weather is warming up, I like to go outside and journal on my porch or read on my porch, especially when it's nice out. So this just definitely reminded me of spring, and like you can see the pretty like outdoors in the background here. I know it's a little bit blurred, but you can definitely tell that she's outside. So I can't wait to get to this in April, hopefully. But yeah, those are the 5 books that I am looking forward to reading in the month of April. Please let me know what you're looking forward to reading in April. I always enjoy seeing what other people are about to read or what they are reading and what they're enjoying. But make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, all the YouTube things that you know how to do. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!